Hey guys, welcome back to the Pulling Curls podcast. Today on episode 209, we are talking about 5 things that you should avoid during pregnancy. Let's untangle it. Hi, I'm Hilary, a serial overcomplicator. I'm also a nurse, mom to 3, and the curly head behind Pulling Curls and the Pregnancy Nurse. This podcast aims to help us stop overcomplicating things and remember how much easier it is to keep things simple. Let's smooth out those snarls with Pregnancy and Parenting Untangled, the Pulling Curls podcast. Okay, guys, today's guest has actually been on the podcast several times. She has a PhD in chemistry from Emory, and she is the mommy behind Evidence-Based Mommy. By the way, you guys, she has such a great registry item. Stay tuned for what she shares at the end. I want to introduce today's guest, Samantha Radford. This episode of the Pulling Curls podcast, Pregnancy and Parenting Untangled, is sponsored by my Safe Eating Guide. If you're wondering what you can eat and can't eat and want to see some real advice from someone who knows rather than social media, check it out. You can find it under resources at the Pregnancy Nurse, or I'll put the link in the show notes. Hey, Samantha, welcome back to the Pulling Curls podcast.
Hey, Hilary. So good to be here with you today.
Yeah, you're so popular. I'm excited to have you back on because I write about all the silly things people think they should avoid during pregnancy, like hot Cheetos or ranch dressing.
I need to hear the hot Cheetos. I need to hear that.
Apparently, people Google, if I eat hot Cheetos, will it hurt my baby's ears?
Oh,
I guess because it's so loud. I don't know.
But aren't other Cheetos just as crunchy?
I figure chips are just as crunchy. I don't think they're
right.
Pretzels. I don't know, but I think I just said no, probably not.
Okay.
Anyway, so today we're going to talk about some actual things you should avoid during your pregnancy with Samantha, who knows all about chemicals and hot Cheetos, maybe. I don't know. Do you know much about hot Cheetos?
I've never tried hot Cheetos. I do like regular Cheetos. Cheetos are one of those things that I don't usually want, but if I have one, then I need the whole bag.
Yeah, it's a gateway drug for me.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And this is fun because I actually just started my own podcast a few months ago. So it's nice to get to do this with someone else. Hilary's going to be my very first guest.
Ooh.
I know. So we're going to be trading episodes. Super excited.
Yeah. So let's dive into what people should be avoiding during pregnancy.
Yeah. So like we talked about before, this is one of those things that it's kind of hard for me to talk about because some of the stuff are things that you can't control. So you can't control just either because it's kind of all around you or because you'd have to get into a time machine and change some things you did before. But we want to focus on the present and what we can control now and not stress about those other things that we can't control.
Yeah. Like tearing at delivery. I'm yeah, you should only have sex with guys who have tiny shoulders.
Oh,
time machine. Oh, okay. Nobody has one.
Right. Oh, man. Okay. So moving on from that, the first thing that I thought of is, a lot of times, especially with the first baby, you want to make the cute little nursery and you want to make it look just perfect and all of that. And if you're wanting to repaint, let someone else do it.
Okay. So any kind of paint, probably avoid.
Yeah. So, ideally, you would use the low VOC. Sometimes they call it no VOC. VOC means volatile organic chemical, by the way. So basically, if you can smell something, that means that it's volatile because it's up into the air.
Okay.
So, of course, for a nursery, you want to use something that's low VOC anyways, but anything you can do to minimize your exposures to those kinds of chemicals would be great. So, let your partner do the painting, have a friend come over, something like that. Try not to be the one doing the painting. And then, open up the windows and let it air out for a while after that.
Okay, that's helpful. I've heard that it's okay to do, I don't know, is it latex? One's better than the other for people to paint with. Is that true? Not really.
Yeah. So I would have to look at the specifics. There are certain brands that call themselves low VOC and they actually do have less of the most toxic stuff. You don't want to use an oil base, which is more kind of an outdoor paint.
Okay.
Now, when I was pregnant with my first, I used acrylic paints. And so I mean, we painted the whole room, but then I also used acrylics to like paint a little tree. And I
Mhm.
did do that myself. I think that's okay because that's like more water based.
Yeah. Well, and
But
you're not doing a whole wall. Maybe that's different too.
yeah, that's true. It's not like this big can, just, when you open up a can of paint, like that hits you like a brick wall, like you smell it.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I like the idea of not painting personally.
I do too. Honestly, I do too. What I really, really like while we're at it, I like not having a nursery. I like just, get a little bassinet and have that in your room and be done with it. Like after the first kid, I didn't do the nursery thing again, but I get that it's cute and exciting and happy. So
Yeah. Well, and you do sometimes need area to store their clothes because you've
that's
taken up
true.
all the spots. I didn't have any money to make a fancy nursery with my first one, so we were lucky to
Yeah.
have a crib. Like that's where we were. So,
Right, right. And then, I mean, eventually, also, I guess they'll need their own room one day, but, you know, do what works for your family.
yeah. Okay, paint. Good. I don't like to paint, so check mark.
Cool. And speaking of painting, if you live in a home, this is number 2, by the way.
Okay.
If you live in a home that was built before like the early 80s, watch out for lead paint. So, the reason I say the early 80s is because lead was removed from paint in 1978. You weren't allowed to put lead in paint anymore at that time. However, like I can imagine contractors just having some extra paint laying around,
Right.
and maybe so that's why I kind of give that couple of year buffer. So I'm not saying that you can't live in a house older than that, but if you are in a home older than that, there are things you need to do to make sure that you avoid lead exposure because that is especially important for you and your child. If you're going to repaint, well, not you, right? Your partner or somebody. If somebody's going to repaint, let them do it and don't try to sand first because I've heard like horror stories of a family that, found out that like, oh, my old, my 1950s home has lead paint. So they freaked out and they sanded the walls to take it off. And that is the absolute worst thing you can do because what happens then is now you've created all this lead dust that's just in the air. The exposure is way, way worse than if you just left that paint there. So it's called encapsulation. If you just paint over it, that's a lot safer. If you do desperately want to get the lead paint out of your home, which I totally understand, you would need a contractor specifically licensed to do that. And it would be way more expensive, but they would know how to do that safely.
Okay. Isn't there a way to check if you have lead paint?
So they make these strips. I've heard that sometimes they are more accurate than others, but it's like if you wet them and then kind of like rub on the paint and then put that on the strip, like it's supposed to turn pink if there's lead in there. I do not know about the accuracy. I actually, when we very first moved up here to Pennsylvania, gosh, it's been 8 years, almost 9 years now. The first place we lived in was old, like maybe the 20s when it was built. 1920s, not, I just realized we have to differentiate now.
I know.
And it's been 3 years we've had to do that. So, anyways, we were living there and that had never crossed my mind. Like lead had never crossed my mind just because it wasn't something that I had to deal with, where I grew up. And one of our dogs chewed on a windowsill and then she died not very long after that. And I was teaching because, so before this, I was a professor of analytical chemistry. So I was teaching chemistry and we were doing an analytical chemistry class. So that's basically how much of what kind of chemical is in this thing is what we're figuring out how to find out. And I was like, oh, let me get some of this paint for y'all to test. There's a whole way you can do it. Like you dissolve the paint and then you put it through this machine. And it was like, I don't know, like 15 or 20% lead, like something insane, huge amounts of lead. And I've gotten to where, because I've seen so much of it, because there's so much of it where I am, like I can kind of look at old paint and I can almost tell just by looking because it has this very specific, like crackly kind of the way it degrades over time, it chips, which, they talk about not letting your kid eat paint chips. So you were going back to latex, like latex paint wouldn't chip like that.
Okay. I don't think it's a bad idea to, if you have a question, to buy those strips, because sometimes
Yeah,
kids will
absolutely.
chew on if you have
Window,
the windowsill, like that pokes out.
yes.
I have seen babies, because it's a lot of times right at their eye level, and they'll just kind of lick it
Yes,
and make love to it.
indeed. Now, first we're talking about head and shoulders, and now we're talking about it's true though, because I mean, when they get to, like what, 9-ish months is when they start pulling up to stand, depending on the baby. Like that's the exact right height for them to pull up on. And babies that age, like they put things in their mouth because that's what they're supposed to do. So it's just the perfect height for them to just gnaw on. And white paint tends to be the kind that would have lead in it. Like you could put that in like any color, but basically lead is especially good for white paint.
Okay.
So since people tend to like to have white windowsills and door frames, which again are like the best chewy spots, that's going to be the worst for lead. Like it's just all bad all the way around. So that's actually another thing. We've talked about painting over to encapsulate that lead, but especially just kind of keep an eye out for like cracks around your windowsills or your door frames as far as the paint goes. And if you see any cracks like that, like, immediately paint over and re-coat that. And you'll want to like dust around that area a bit more frequently and like vacuum the floors around that area or like wet mop, a bit more frequently to get all of that up.
Okay. Good advice. No lead. Got it.
Yes, indeed. So that was one of the heavy metals we have to be concerned about. The other one is mercury. So this is probably one you've already heard of, but you want to avoid eating not all fish because there's definitely there's those fatty acids and stuff that are really good for your baby's brain development and all that. But if you can avoid bigger fish, so fish like shark or swordfish or king mackerel, those that are up at the top of the food chain, those are the ones that you want to avoid so that you can avoid mercury exposure.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's basically, yeah. So you may have heard of something called like bioaccumulation when you were taking
Nope.
chemistry or biology way back when. Have you heard of that, Hilary?
We didn't accumulate things when I went to school in the 90s. I don't recall that at all.
You don't, okay. See, that's nice to know. That's one of those things I'm like, everybody knows bioaccumulation because I'm in my crazy little silo. So the idea is, let's say, so I guess the lowest level would be like plankton or something. So let's say that there's some plankton and there's like mercury and they're just from like fallout from like smoke and stuff from industrial processes. So if you have little plankton that have like some mercury in them just from being exposed to it, then like a little fish eats the plankton, then like the little fish has some mercury in it. And the little fish is going to eat like a bunch of plankton and all those plankton are going to like deposit mercury in it. And the mercury does not leave the fish, like it's just stuck in there. Like it doesn't pass out
Right. Yep.
of it. And so then like that little fish gets eaten by a bigger fish and that bigger fish eats like a bunch of different little fishes. So it has even more mercury in it. And then like the biggest fish, like the shark or whatever, eats lots of those medium-sized fish. And so basically the higher up the food chain you go, those chemicals that are toxic, like they're more concentrated inside like the fish flesh that you eat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
Okay, yeah. So if you eat smaller fish, you will be getting less of those toxic things. And of course, you'll still get the advantages of like the DHA and all that, like the fatty acids that are so great for your baby's brain development, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good because I think a lot of people just avoid fish in general, like no tuna fish,
Right.
no salmon. So it's good to know why you should just avoid. I don't know. Those other fishes are usually too expensive for the Erickson family.
It's true. Yeah, no, I get that. And I mean, even with tuna, so like if you get a big tuna steak, like that's obviously a bigger tuna.
Right.
They use like the smaller, less awesome fish to make like the canned tuna, for your tuna salad or whatever.
Right.
So you're actually better off getting like canned tuna than you are like a big tuna steak, just because it's a smaller fish that was used to make it.
Okay. Good info.
Yeah.
Well,
fun fact with my third pregnancy, like I wanted tuna salad all the time, but I think the craving was actually mayonnaise. because I wanted like extra mayonnaise on my tuna salad sandwich, which is super gross, but totally unrelated. Just we were talking about fish.
I do love mayonnaise, though. I'm on board with that.
Yeah. So, and of course, like you said, some people just avoid all fish. We don't have to do that. Do avoid raw fish. So if you're a sushi kind of person, like now's not the time, unfortunately.
Or you can have the California, is it? I don't know. Like the Philly where it's like cucumber, cream cheese.
Yes, that's totally fine. It's you can't do the raw fish.
Yep.
And that's more of a bacteria thing than it is a chemical thing. But bacteria is important too. So another one that you may or may not have heard of is cold deli meat.
Yep.
So like I said, the third one, I was obsessed with like mayonnaise on all my sandwiches. The fourth kid, I wanted a turkey sandwich so freaking bad. But I knew, the recommendation is not to eat deli meat. And what's interesting, this goes back to like the thing that you think would be better actually is worse. So there's a couple things you can do. Like if you're bound to determine you really want deli meat, the reason that they say you can't have it is because a particular bacteria called Listeria. And if you get sick with it, I think it can actually cause your child to be stillborn, right? And it's actually worse in the third trimester.
The problem is it can pass through to the baby. So the baby gets the Listeria infection too. Rarely. It doesn't always happen.
No.
If you get a Listeria infection, and this is all pretty darn rare, just so everybody knows, but it can happen. And so it's easily avoided or heated up. So
exactly. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, it's rare, but also it's worth it to avoid. Anywho, as far as Listeria goes, it is more likely to be, so you know how you can either get like the Oscar Mayer or whatever brand, like over, in the fridge case, like with the dairy and all that stuff.
Yep.
Or you can get like the nice deli meat over like in the deli case that they've cut up for you. So it's actually less safe. Again, it's all rare either way, but it's less safe to go to the deli case and get your deli meat there, just because there's less, it's less like commercialized and processed because they're doing it right there. So it's more likely that there would be an issue kind of like at that last point as far as contamination goes than in a place that's been, sterilized and it's all kind of very regimented.
Right.
Like whenever they pack it at like the factory, whatever. But like you said, there's easy ways to avoid it. You could go the tuna salad route like I did if you're just wanting the sandwich more. But if it's really killing you, like you want turkey or ham or salami or whatever, you can heat it up either like in a pan real quick or in the microwave. Just the official temperature is 165 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's very hard to take the temperature of like one slice of turkey.
Yeah.
I'm like, how are you supposed to know that? But they say if it's steaming hot, that's how you know it's hot enough to have killed Listeria and you're good.
Yeah. Which I was like, I wonder if heating up your Subway sandwich is enough. And I was thinking that if I was pregnant, I'd probably ask them to heat it twice.
Yeah.
Something like that. Because I don't know that just, toasted sandwich is enough to heat up the deli meat enough. Personally, that's just my personal opinion.
I agree with that. I mean, I know that they've got like the little microwaves, like if you get bacon there, how they'll like heat up the bacon real quick.
Yeah.
Maybe you could ask them to do the deli meat separate. In fact, I think I did that with the fourth kid because like I said, desperately wanted turkey sandwiches all the time. So they can heat that up separately. And then if you want it toasted too, you can.
That's smart. Yeah.
Yes. So that's how I did it. And Firehouse subs, I don't know if y'all have those out in Arizona.
We do.
But, oh man, it's amazing. Anyways, they like steam their sandwiches. So that should be good, I would think.
Well, okay. My son works at a sandwich shop. I should figure this out with him. It's a delicious one. Yeah, that's an important one that I think a lot of people just kind of ignore and they don't exactly know why. They think it's food poisoning, right? But listeria is way more than like regular food poisoning. And you're more likely to get listeria when you're pregnant and then passing it on to the baby, which is even worse than like E. coli, because we all know about like raw chicken. None of us are out there eating raw chicken because of E. coli, but that actually doesn't pass to the baby. So that would be just you getting dehydrated would be the problem with something like that.
Right. And see, this is why it's nice to talk to like a nurse who actually deals with this. Cause see, you know that side. Okay.
Oh, and two things I also learned. Beef jerky
Yes.
is also in the same category because it is
Oh.
actually not heated. It's dried. And so there is still a chance of listeria. And that would be like your Slim Jims, your beef
Mhm.
jerky, any of those. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. And
I
I know a
had
lot of people are
no
worried about the
idea.
nitrites. The FDA doesn't mention that at
Mhm.
all. So there you go.
Yeah, that's a whole nother that kind of goes back into the chemical territory. Right. So if you can manage to get like the nitrite free, that would be better. And then the last thing, since we're on food, is thinking about again some of the best foods for us. So like spinach and strawberries and kale, especially when you're pregnant, like the nutrients that's in there are just amazing for you. Unfortunately, those are the foods that when they're grown conventionally have the most pesticides. So if you can, they're called the Dirty Dozen. So the Environmental Working Group puts out this list every year that pretty much stays the same every year, but it's the list of like the top 12 types of produce, fruits, and vegetables that have the most pesticides in them. So if you can manage to get those particular things organic, at least while you're pregnant, that will do a lot to avoid pesticides.
Yeah. And definitely check out that list, you guys, because some of the ones that I was like, well, that's probably bad, aren't on that list. So if you just stick to those 12, I think your
Mhm.
grocery budget can stay reasonable and you can still eat because like organic strawberries are getting cheaper, I feel like, than they
Oh,
used to
nice.
be. I don't know. Maybe
Or
I'm
maybe everything else
hallucinating.
raised so much that now the
It's true.
differential, you're like, that's not so bad.
But
Yeah,
still eat the whole rainbow when you're pregnant. It's going to help
so
benefit
much better.
you and the baby because that baby will just take whatever it wants from you and your bones. Like
It's
it
true.
will eat you
Well, and
alive.
that's, yeah, because we were talking about lead and calcium. Like your body, like the baby literally like leaches calcium out of your bones when you're pregnant to make itself, I guess.
Yep.
So lots of calcium.
Yeah.
Because if you're not getting it in your diet, it'll just like suck the life out of your bones for real.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many friends I have who've had several babies who literally are probably going to need dentures. I don't know. I'm like, another
Oh
cavity?
man.
You're going to the dentist again? Wow. So, yeah, keep eating all the good things.
Yes. So yeah, those are our 5 things. So avoiding, let's see, let's get it all. Letting someone else do the painting. Don't like sand your walls, if you think you have lead paint, like just paint over it. Avoid the larger fish, but eat the smaller fish. Heat up your deli meat if you're going to have deli meat. And avoid the Dirty Dozen unless you get it organic, but also like eat all the different fruits and vegetables.
Yeah. All right, awesome. I'm going to put a plug in for wine or alcohol because I just did a research subject
Oh
on it.
yeah.
I don't know. I don't honestly know how bad it is in very tiny consumption, but I will
Mhm.
say that every single agency says no amount of alcohol is safe. Drinking alcohol, not rubbing alcohol. Well, you
Right.
should never drink
Don't
rubbing
drink that
alcohol.
either. So obvious that like I forgot to say,
But they did
like
say
I
that
was
like 30% of women drink during their pregnancy. It was a
really.
number large, maybe 30 is too high, but it was 10, 20, I don't know, something in there. But let me just put a plug in. If you're considering drinking during pregnancy, talk with your provider about you and your needs. But yeah, there you go.
And smoking while we're doing the super obvious. Like,
Yes.
please don't. And vaping also, which
Yeah.
is a whole nother. Anyways, okay.
Those ones do seem obvious versus mercury in fish. Yeah.
That's true. But since we're saying it, yeah, let's say it. So
All right. Thanks for coming on, Samantha.
yeah. And then too, if you want to kind of continue this whole non-toxic journey for your child, I have a non-toxic baby registry checklist. So you can see like which all brands really are like non-toxic versus the ones who just like pretend that they are. And I've got that as a freebie that I have given Hilary to put in the show notes.
Yeah. So you can find that at my show notes, or you can just go to Evidence Based Mommy and you can find it. Is it on your homepage?
Uh, It should be. We'll
Or
work
like
on
in the
that.
menu, you'll have like a freebie section. Look around or just
Yeah.
search it on Evidence-Based Mommy if you're,
Yeah,
but
for
that's
sure.
awesome because you never know, right?
It's true. Yeah, there's so much that you don't even think about until you've looked at it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Great. So definitely go
Okay.
check out that baby registry checklist. And Samantha, I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I think it can feel like there's a lot of things that you have to avoid during pregnancy, but really when you boil it down, there isn't all that much beyond what you should be avoiding in regular life. Like a lot of these lead we should be avoiding in regular life. You just have to be a little bit more extra careful when you're pregnant. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Thanks for joining us on the Pulling Curls podcast today. If you liked today's episode, please consider reviewing, sharing, subscribing. It really helps our podcast grow. Thank you.